Hello everyone, welcome to another Winston video. In this video, we'll go back to our bookstore API that we have recently created and we'll implement logging to this API. So what we want to do is three things. We want to log the requests that we are getting. So we'll just log different types of requests and responses depending on the environment. Then we want to replace the console.log so that we have more flexibility in terms of where we save these logs. And then we want to have an error logger. So this will be something that if there's an error inside of our application that is not handled by us, we will log these errors to a file. Okay, so this will be very simple. First, what we need to do is go to our main app folder and create a file. Let's call it loggers.js. And I'm already calling it loggers because I'm expecting more than one. Okay, then what we need is we need to do some imports. But before we can do some imports, we need to do npm I to install, and we need to install Winston and express Winston. So Winston is the main logging library that we'll be using, and express Winston is something like a wrapper around Winston that allows us to seamlessly integrate it as an express middleware function. Okay, so from this part, what we will definitely need is we will need a create logger. And this comes from Winston. Okay, then our, let's say, const logger will be equal to create logger. And now inside here, what we need to do is we need to define two properties. One will be transports. Transports define us where we want to save the logs. And I have to make sure that I spell transports correctly. Okay, and I would suggest that for our transports, we just do new transports, and the transports comes from Winston also, and this will be .file, and here we just pass a level. So actually a level of info here will log, using this transport, everything with a level of info and above. So we'll be using just info, warning, and error. So for our use case, it will just log info, warning, and error. And the Winston is very flexible, so there you can also easily adjust that, so you can set custom levels, but it will always use log this level of severity and everything that is more severe. So I currently don't remember if these go down or up, but everything that is more severe. Okay, and then we need a file name and our file name, and I will just create a variable here, which will be called the logs folder, because then it will be easier for us to change. So if you want to in the future change the route to the logs, this will be possible. Okay, and here let's use a string and we say logs.log. So this will be logs.log will be just a name of our file. Okay, and then we need to pass formats. So here we place a comma and we say format. And to have a format, we need to import format because we will be using something called format.combine. And inside this format.combine, I want to have a timestamp on my logs. I like to have a timestamp. Then I want them to be in a JSON format. And then I want them to be pretty printed. So if you are super concerned about performance or space, you can remove pretty print. Then your logs will be a little bit harder to read. However, I think it's good. You can also experiment with this and add this only if you're on non-production environment. This is also a possibility. I add it everywhere. Okay, and this is our logger that we will use for the to log the messages, right? So this will be used instead of console.log.warning.error. But actually what I want to do with this is, if I am on a non-prod environment, I want to log also to a file, or sorry, to a console, to a file we are already logging. So what we can do is, here we can define something called another variable called logger transports. and I can set it equal to this array that we have right here. And I can write an if statement, basically using our process.env.node_env, right? So this is the variable that we have defined here. And here, if it's equal to, or if it's different than, production, what we will do is we will take the logger.transports and we'll append to, push. And what we will push is new transports.console. And this will mean that on a non-production environment, we will also log to a console. And now we just need to take this array and replace this array that we have right here. Okay, this is our create logger. Let's, at the end, let's say module.exports, and let's here do a logger. Okay, then we need to do a request logger, right? So this we const request logger equals create logger also, we'll opening parentheses and passing some attributes. Now for the transports, I will do the same thing I did here, right? So I'll define an array right here. I will call it logger request transports. And here, what I want to do now is by default, I want to log to files, right? So what I want to have is I want to have two files. One will be with a level warning or warn, and it will be called request warning. And the other one, what I want to have, so I'll just copy this part, I will place a comma here and I will paste it here with error. So actually the way it works is if there is an error request, which by default is a response code 500 or higher, this will be logged to both of these files. So to this file that I will call request.error or request errors, and this will be logged to request warnings. This is just how Winston works. And I actually don't know of an easy way to adjust it other than creating two different logger instances, which I don't want to do. So basically here we'll have an error response logged twice, but I don't think that's that big of an issue. In the end of the day, you should not have that many error responses. And so basically what I want to do is if I'm on non-prod, I want to say logger request transports.push. And here, I didn't want to open the brackets. What I want to push is I want to have new transports or new lowercase transports dot file. And actually what I want to have is, and I found it very useful on non-production environments, I just want to log every request and every response. So I just say level info and then file name. And here we do, once again, use our logs folder. And here we do, let's say request info.log. Basically what I want to have is I want to have it all logged. I found it useful for debugging. Of course, then you need to sort of make sure that the size does not get crazy. But so maybe if you're doing performance tests and you're making billions of requests, it makes sense to turn it off. But just for standard debugging and purposes, I found this useful. Okay, so now I can grab this. So logger request transports, and I can put it right here. And right next to here, I need to define formats, which will be exactly the same as here. Once again, you can turn off the pretty print if you desire so. Okay, and so what I need to do is logger and then request logger. Okay, and now what we can do is we have exported the two loggers right here, so we can go to our app. We are going to our application right here, and we need to do a couple of things. So before our router, we are doing app.use express Winston, and we need to import express Winston. So const express Winston equals require express dash Winston. And we are using this express Winston. We are saying express Winston.logger. And right here we are saying Winston instance, basically request logger, right? So this is our request logger. The only thing that we need to do is we need to import our request logger. So let's do it here. Let's say const. Here we'll be using also the other logger, so I'll import it right away. Require /loggers. Okay, so here we have Winston logger, and then only thing we are logging the request here, so we only need to pass status levels so that Express Winston uses the default levels, meaning so that 500 plus is an error, 400 plus is a warning, and then below it's an info. Okay, so here we have this part. And actually what I want to have is by default, you have this request whitelist, and it does contain a number of useful properties like request, headers, original URL, method, and so on. But I actually like to add, what I actually like to add it is I like to add it to properties to it. And these are the body properties. So basically I say express Winston.request whitelist, and this is like a global variable. And to this I push body. So basically now I will see all the data that comes with a request. Right, so on non-prod, this is super useful for debugging. You can easily see what's the body that you have received and what's the body that you have sent back. And on production, if you get an error, you definitely want to know what was the body of the request. So, and here I only say request whitelist, but also response whitelist, right? So this works for a request, the data we log about the request, and here this works for the data we log about the body. Okay, so that's it. And I want to do one more thing. So here I want to say abuse, and I want to create this error logger. So I want to say once again, express Winston.error logger. And here we will be using the same logger. So I say Winston instance is our logger. And this is basically a different instance than the request logger. This is the instance of our standard logger. The difference between these is the transports, right? There can be more differences. For example, I could define a custom format of the messages, but I currently don't think that's necessary for us. Okay, and that's it. We can just say docker compose app --build, and let's see if this works. Okay, so our app is started. Here we can see our test.rest file. So let's try to make a request. We have received a 200 response, and now you remember we are on a development environment. So what we would expect is that we get a, so here, let's see, here what we would expect, right? Because we are on a development environment, we would expect that we get here the logger request transports, we get an entry in the request info.log. The problem is that we might have got it, but we don't see it. So to see, because we are on a different, so basically this file got created inside of this the Docker container that the application is running in. This we can verify by saying Docker container ls, right? And here what we can grab is our bookstore CRUD API app. We can say docker exec-it and this, and let's say ls. So here we can see that the logs folder should have been created. And here we can see the logs folder. So then we can say cut, so to display the contents, and we say -logs -request info.log. Right, and here we can see our request and response have been logged. Okay, so actually this works great, but for debugging purposes, I think it's much easier if we just saw it right here. So basically, what we can do is very simply, we can go to our Docker, and actually going to close this because this is very hard to look at probably. Let's go to our docker compose.test, and we need to add right here, we need to do a small adjustment. So we need to say test logs will map to logs. Right, and basically what this will do is it will create a test logs folder once we modify this something in the logs, and it will here store all of our logs from the container, right? So we just added a volume. And then let's add also this one to the standard container. So here we go to volumes. So basically to our dev version, right? Because we have modified our test version right now, and now let's modify our dev version. So actually the version we are currently running. Okay, and I will take this down. And because we have modified a Docker Compose file, so we have modified sort of the image that we are working here with, or the container itself, we need to do another build. So we need to Docker Compose app -- build. Okay, I'll currently close this. Okay, so it's running currently. Let's try to make a request. So I'll once again get our test.rest file. Once again, here we have our response. It's again 200. And now you can see that we have the dev logs created. So if I go to our request info, here you see our request. Okay, but this is definitely something that we don't want to have in our version control. Therefore, we add it here, right? So we say dev logs. And let's also say test logs, just for the future. Okay, this looks like it's working perfect. Now, next step, we need to replace all of our console.errors or console.logs, whatever we have in our application, with the logger. So right now, we use the search functionality, and we just go over application looking for console. And here we can see console.error. This will replace with logger.error. And we just say, and here it's imported the logger for us. That's great. Okay, do we now have it somewhere here? Okay, we have once again our containers restarting. I will just stop it because it's a little bit distracting. Okay, so here we have console.log. So let's now just replace it with logger.info. And here our logger has been imported. That's good. Now the same thing story here, logger.error. Okay, logger has been imported. That's great. And the same story right here, logger.error, error. I'll actually copy this part, and we go to the next one, we replace it, we save, go to the next one, we replace it, we save, and here we log a different message. I'm actually not doing a copy, a replace, because I just want to, take a look at what we are logging here before I change it. Okay, and now we are in different files. So once again, needs to type it so that it gets imported at the top, logger.error. Okay, once again, I can copy this part and I can jump right here. Save, remember to save. Jump right here, jump right here, jump right here. Okay, and now it will log all of our entries. If we have ever an error where we basically started there, it will log this error. Okay, fantastic. So basically, now we have added the loggers, but as you remember, we are very keen on testing, therefore we need to add some tests. So let's go into our test file, let's create a new test file, let's call it loggers.js. And inside this thing, let's create a describe block that will be called testing loggers. Inside the testing loggers, let's create a callback. This we all know very well. I'll try to go through the test sort of quickly. And let's create another block. Let's say testing logger. So we'll be testing the logger, and we'll be testing the request logger and the error logger. Okay, so now, before we have this, or after we have this, let's say that we have a test case and info logger writes to a file. Right, and here we want to have a test case, so basically we'll be writing something with our logger. Let's define a message, cost test info message equals, let's just say maybe this is a test message, and let's do some special characters just for the sake of it. Test info message. Okay, and now let's do a logger, and let's use this part. This is not loggers, this is logger, and this is not from Winston. This is from, we need to go up one, and we need to go inside our application, and then we need to go to loggers. Okay, so it's logger.info, and then we'll be going to test info message. We'll be basically writing this message to a file. Now, we need to now read this file. For this, we'll need the fs we have already used when setting up the DB, if you remember. So I'll just say const fs equals require fs. Now we need to read the file. We say fs.read file, and we basically read the following. So here we just want to get our logs folder. And yes, the logs folder we have here in this defined. So, and just so that I don't need to repeat it, I will just put this here to the exports. So this will be exported also, and I will be able to export or import it also here, like logs folder. Okay, now we have this only in one place defined. This is our logs folder, and then what I need to do is I need to go to logs.log. And here this function takes a callback. So basically, if there's an error, let's throw the error. But if not, I like to check if the data, so the file, includes, oops, I meant to say dash includes, basically our test info message. But I would like to actually test if it requires something more. And in order to do that, because maybe I will show you this, so I will say test includes, and I will just say test info message, and this will all work. And this is done. Okay, so I will actually say docker compose up, and now we say dash f docker compose.test.yml dash build, right? So I'm building the test version of our application. Oh, I made some mistake. And of course I made a mistake. It's docker compose, then dash f and dash, or not dash, up is here. Okay, now this is building, and this has run our tests, and you can see that here it's passing, and this is probably passing because, or this is actually, I expected to be passing, but I actually did not provide here an expect. So basically we expect that the includes is true. Or let's actually make it false, just so that we can see if it fails. And I will actually, in a second, and we'll define a cleanup for this. I will now manually go into our request info, and I will delete everything. Sorry, not here. I will go right here, and I will delete everything that we have right here, just so that we don't have a positive test case, because this has been logged there before. Okay, and we actually have like true, false at test loggers 14. The problem is that here, because this code runs a little bit asynchronous, sometimes we are getting an error in a different test case. But here basically you can see, right, where the error lies. But this means that it's just, that it works. I'll now start it once again, and I'll start working on a cleanups. So I'll define a function. Let's call it cleanup. And basically what this function is supposed to do is supposed to clean up all the test log files, just so that we don't get a positive test case, because in the previous test iteration something has been changed. So basically what I want to have is, once again, we are using the FS. From this, I'm using the truncate sync. I'm using the synchronous version, just so that we don't get, once again, issues with asynchronous code. And I will just say, okay, logs folder. And here I get all the files, so -log or /logs.log, and I think we don't need the slash, because the slash is already included as we have it here. And here once again, and we are also have this request info, request warning. This will become soon. And here will become request error. Okay, and now it should basically clean up our files. So let's take a look right here. Right here, where we have something. Oh, here, request warning. So it should not be very long once again, right? So I would expect it to be cleaned up at some point. Okay, I think it just has gotten. Let's go somewhere where why do we have? All right, I'm expecting it to clean everything up, and I actually did not define or did not call it. So of course we need a Beforehook in which we will be calling this cleanup function. Okay, but so now we have tested that an info logger writes to a file. And let's currently try to do something else. Let's currently try to test if the warning logger writes to a file, right? So I'll just copy this test case. I will say, or warning logger writes to a file, and this is a warning message. And here maybe I'll just change it to test message, and also here, just so that I can copy it for the following test cases. Okay, but I wanted to do something else because currently we are testing just if this error message is there, right? So let me run this once again. I actually don't need to be building it every time I'm running it. I kind of forgot it. Okay, and we have an error. This is no such file of the directory or directory as request warning, because I believe it's request warnings, if I believe. Okay, and now what I wanted you to check is, okay, here we have an empty file. Okay, the issue turned out to be pretty silly. I just had this file edited in edit mode and I didn't save it, therefore it was not showing me the newest content, but now it is. And now I can show you that basically here these messages appear in the logs, and that's good. Okay, let's go back here. By the way, here I think we did not have the S. I added it. I will enable this once again because I disabled it for a while. And now I would expect that if I run it, basically we don't see like more messages here, but we still see only 4. Okay, that's good. They disappeared and the new messages only are added. That's good. Okay, this means that it works. But what I want to show you is that currently we are testing only if this message appears. And I would like to also test that we have the correct level here. And here you can see info most likely, because here I did not specify that it should be logger.warn. I would also like to test if the level is correct. And in order to do this, what we need to do is we need to change the format a little bit. So, so that it's just easier to test. I mean, we could also test in such format, but it will be much easier once we change it, just so that it's not pretty printed actually, because then it's just one string and it's much easier to test against it. So what we want to do before is we want to say, and you can set it, by the way, dynamically, right? So you can just say logger.format equals format.combine, and here we just say format timestamp, and format JSON. Okay, and now what you are able to do is basically I will run it once again. You will see what's the result basically. Let it run. And here we can see that if format is not defined, okay, yes, because we need to import format. So what we need to do is we need to say const format equals require Winston. Okay, and now we can rerun it once again. I hope it works this time. Okay, tests are passing. Let's go to logs. And now we have just one string, and what we can do is I can grab this piece of information and I can just add it right here, right? So we'll be testing against a test message, but not only against a test message, we'll be testing against something like this, right? So here and here it will, what does it say later on? It also says message, and then our message is right here. Okay, so I'll also copy this part right here. message, and then we will have our test message. Then it also ends with double quotation mark. Okay, and here I will basically put this the same thing, and I will say just warn, and I will once again copy this test case, and I will say logger.error, and this is an error warning message. This is an error, so not warning but error message, and here we are setting level error. Okay, let's run it. Okay, here many things happened. We can see some messages getting logged to the console as they should be, but this works. Okay, that's great. Therefore, let's continue. Let's currently test something that will be a little bit more complex. We'll be testing request logger. So this mechanism that's supposed to just log all our requests. And here, what we want to say is, let's say warning request is logged to a file. And here we want to take the done once again, because we will be working with some callbacks. We are using our standard chai request because we are actually will be making a request. For this, we need const, not const chai, of course. Require chai. Oops, chai. We need our chai HTTP. So we'll say const chai HTTP equals require chai dash HTTP dash not equal sign. Okay, and then we need our application. Let's actually maybe make it a little bit more organized. Okay, and here we need our const app equals require two folders app. Then once again, I believe two folders. No, we are going two folders up, and then we are going into our app folder, and we are going into our app file. Okay, and then what we need is we need to say that the app or chai.use chai HTTP. Okay, so once again we are going up right here to a test, then we are going into our app folder, into our app module. Okay, that's good. So here we have this part, and now we need to go down right here, and we need to write our test. So basically chai.request, then app. Let's see if this got imported. Yes, this is an express application. Okay, that's good. And now we say chai request app.get. And here we are getting, let's say /book, I don't know, does not exist. So if you remember, this will return 404. This way I'm actually working on it, returning as a 404. I will actually go right here so that I don't need, right here, so that I don't need to rewrite everything that we have, but I can just borrow this part. And because I don't need to send anything, I want to make a get request, and I want to does not exist. I want the authorization to make sense, and I don't need to, or in the callback, I want to pass underscore error underscore response. We will not be using this because what we'll be doing is we'll be using the fs once again to read the file, and what we will be reading from is our logs. So here, let's say logs folder, and we say request warnings.log, right? Because it should be in our request warnings. And then here it takes an error data callback. So basically, if we have an error, let's throw the error, but else let's define our includes. And here we want to do once again a match on data.includes, and then let's check what we should do a match on. I hope here we have some requests, and I think here it makes sense that we just do a match on this URL. I think that should be sufficient. So basically data.includes, and here we say URL / does not exist, right? And we expect that includes to true, and we to pass it down here. Let's actually check if this works. Okay, here we have a failure. Logs folder is not defined. Okay. Logs folder, because it's spelled with a capital F. Okay, this makes sense. Okay, we have 56 passing. That's good. Let's actually, before we go forward, let's try to make it fail. Always very good to make it fail if you are using like callbacks, and here you're using double callback and so on. So I always like to make it fail. Okay, this is failing. That's good. Okay, this we have got taken care of. And now let's copy this test case. We will be checking for errors. So let's say error request is logged to a file. And this will be slightly more complex because we actually don't have a route that just returns 500. So 500, you always need to get some kind of error that we didn't handle. And hopefully we did handle most of them. This is why I think it's simplest if we just say app.get and now just say slash testing, testing error route. And we are essentially defining a new route, right? No, not router, but route. And here I will say request response. I'll pass it right here. I will just say res status 500 dot JSON. This is a testing error message, right? And I can define the error message here, just so that we can look it up later. Right, so I'll copy this part, paste it right here. And just like this, I think we just need to now make a GET request on this route. Basically right here. Okay, we need authorization. And then what we need is we need to say request error. And this request error needs to include this error message. Maybe I'll add here from an endpoint, just so that's a little bit more unique. Okay, and let's try if this works. Okay, here we have an error, logs request error, because it's request errors once again. Okay, this time we have it passing. Okay. Then let's maybe go ahead and check the last case that we have here, and let's check if our info level is actually logged. So here we say info request is logged to a file, and I think here we don't need anything super special. We just want to make a standard request. Let's make it on /book, just on our normal /book, and we'll be going against request info. And here I think we can just check. So basically the URL that we had right here, this is the same check on an URL. Where did we have it? Right here, right? So I will just copy this part, paste it right here. And this time we are expecting just URL book. Okay. I once again try to run it. This time it should be good also. And we have 58 passing. Okay, we have one last thing to do. And this one last thing will be, I think, slightly more tricky because we'll be testing for an error. So what do we need for this is we need to say testing error logger. And to test this error logger, we need to define a Beforehook. In the Beforehook, what we'll need to do is, first off, let's define an endpoint that actually gives us an error, but not responds with an error to the client. I mean, it will also do, but we need to throw an error to the application itself. So let's say testing throw error. Let's say request response. So this will be an unhandled error, right? So this will just throw new error. And let's define some kind of an error message, right? So before up here, let's say const error message equals This is a thrown error message. All right, let's put it right here. Okay, that's good. And we need to do one more thing, because if you remember here in the app.js, we have put this Winston, the error Winston logger, at the end. So after our book router, right? So after our router, that's very important. And now, because this will run first and this will run second, we would not see this error in our logs. So basically what we need to do is we need to copy this point once again. We need to go down here, and in the Beforehook, we need to once again define the logger. And here I need to only grab, where's the Express Winston require here? I need to grab this part, I need to go to my logs, and I need to require also Express Winston so that I can use it. Okay, now it should work. Okay, so we are in a Beforehook. In a Beforehook also, just so that it's finished before we start testing, we want to make a request. I want to make it a try catch block, because this will result in error on our application. Let's maybe copy one that we already have here, just so that we don't need to write it all from the beginning. Okay, we want to make an error, and inside the end, we actually don't want to have anything. This can be empty, and inside, in case we catch an error, here we don't want to do anything. We want to return, right? So just return from the Beforehook. We don't even need this. Okay. Now for the actual test case, we say error logger logs a message to a file. We will be using done. And right here, what we want to do is we want to read file once again. This will be once again from our logs folder, logs.log, and this takes a callback with an error and data. This we have already defined higher, and if we have an error, let's throw an error. Otherwise, let's define the includes, and this includes, let's check for our error message that we have defined. Yes, up here, so that is available to us right here. And then we expect this includes to be true. And we want to be done here. Okay. Let's see if our tests are passing. If yes, this would be everything tested. Okay, here we have a problem. Error logger logs a message to file. So here we get an error, okay. And we get an error because we actually did not call our error endpoint. Okay, now it should be good. Okay, 59 passing, and I've seen like errors being printed right here. So this means that is good, right? Okay, that's good. So now we can actually, because we didn't do it yet, we did not actually run our application just to check how our app is doing in a standard way. So actually I will not run the tests right here. I will just start up our application. I will go to our test.rest file and I will just make a request. We get a 200. I will now inspect the def logs in request.info. I would expect at the top something with a timestamp 1856. You must believe me, that's exactly right now. We have our status code. Okay, let's maybe make some more requests. All right, let's maybe send. Okay, this here we can send. Okay, here we get 200. Here we get something. Let's maybe create a book. So here we have 201 created. Let's check if we have this now at the down request.info. We have here. Okay, I'm expecting our test logs. I need to be going to def logs. Okay, here we have see book has been created. Okay, that's good. Let's maybe go back to our test rest. So we have created a book right now. Let's maybe try to delete a book, right? Okay, we got 404. So I would be expecting that, yes, we have it in the request info because it logs info and everything more severe, which includes warning and error. And I would also expect it currently in our request warning. And we also have it, 404. Okay, that's great. That's our Winston logging added. I don't know how long it took us. I believe around half an hour. But you can see like half an hour to add a solid logging functionality that is very easy to adjust, very easy to change, and to write tests for it. I think the implementation itself was like 10 minutes maybe. So basically very simple. You can easily now adjust it. So I hope now you see the power of Winston. And with this, I would like to thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next episodes.